Let's see. Constitution of the U.S. Now, the reason why we're watching this is because there's a lot of people out there that claim to be constitutionalists or feel like they have an idea that they know what the hell's in the Constitution, and chances are they don't. It's like the Constitution is a lot like Jesus. People will take it and they'll take the concept and they'll use it like to apply to anything that they like, and they'll say that it's against anything they don't like, even though it doesn't have anything to do with the thing itself. Like a lot of people that really claim to be into Jesus and talk about like what he would want or what he did or what he believed had nothing to do with what he actually like claimed to preach or any of that stuff. Same with the Constitution. They'll put stuff to the Constitution that has nothing to do with what actually is in the Constitution. And it's freaking crazy. But anyway, this video is the Constitution, the Articles, the Federalism, Crash Course, U.S. History. This video is uploaded by a channel called CrashCourse. I will hit that like button and we will check this out. What I'm saying is unconstitutional. Just use it to apply to anything you don't like.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course U.S. History, and today we're going to talk about the United States Constitution. And in doing so, we're going to explore how the American style of government became the envy of the entire world, so much so that everyone else copied us. What's that, Stan? We're not going to talk about other countries stealing our form of government because no other country stole our form of government? That doesn't seem possible,
Yeah.
Stan.
Now today is the 4th of July, but that does not mean that I will not criticize things that deserve to be criticized, or not even criticize, but just like acknowledge stuff that might not automatically paint America in the rose-colored tint that most people put it in, or most Americans put it in. By no means does that mean that I have a problem with America. I love America. I love being from America. I am proud to be an American. But I mean, you still have to take accountability and acknowledge when your country does something wrong, or if there's something that is misconstrued about your country, you still have to acknowledge it. You don't just ignore it because you like the country or whatever else. If anything, that just does a disservice to the country itself.
No, Stan, not the libertage. Cue the intro. So today we're going to learn why the green areas of not America didn't copy us. Alright, so as Americans may dimly remember from history classes, the constitutional system we've been living under since 1788, the year of the first presidential election, was not the original American government. The first government set up by the Continental Congress was called the Articles of Confederation, and it was, in a word, bad. In 2 words, it was not good, which is why it only lasted 10 years. The problem with the Confederation is that it wasn't so much a framework for a national government as it was a firm league of friendship, which unfortunately only sounds like a team of Care Bear superheroes. The Articles set up a government that consisted of a one-house body of delegates, with each state having a single vote, who, acting collectively, could make decisions on certain issues that affected all the states. There was no president and no judiciary. You can try to tell me that John Hanson, the president of the Congress, was the first American president, but it's just not true. Any decision required 9 of the 13 congressional votes, which pretty much guaranteed that no decisions would ever be made. Ah, supermajorities, always so efficient. But besides the 2/3 requirement, the Congress was very limited in what it could actually do. The government could declare war, conduct foreign affairs, and make treaties. Basically the stuff you need to do to go to war with England. It could coin money, but it couldn't collect taxes. That was left to the states. So if you needed money to, say, go to war with Britain, you had to ask the states politely. The Articles could be amended, but that required a...
And that's actually one of the reasons why the Confederate States of America were so inefficient and sucked so bad, because when it came time to round up like volunteers or conscription or whatever the hell else, if you go to a state and the state says they don't want to give it to you, and you're a country that centers itself on states' rights, guess what? You're shit out of luck. But it's whatever. I mean, we already did the Checkmate Lincolnites videos that talked about like how it wasn't really about states' rights and how the Confederate States of America went out of their way numerous times to completely what's the word I'm looking for? To completely like bypass that. Like for example, when it came to slavery in Confederate States of America, on that subject there was no states issue. It was based on the entire country. State slavery was legal. You could, like, if I was like, say, Louisiana, for example, and I said, you know what, I want to make it so that slavery is illegal. Guess what? Can't do it because fuck states' rights. In this case, you go with what we want, despite the fact that you claim to have been about states' rights, but it's whatever.
To say go to war with Britain, you had to ask the states politely. The articles could be amended, but that required a unanimous vote, so 0 amendments were ever passed. The government was deliberately weak, which followed logically from Americans' fear of tyrannical governments taxing them and quartering soldiers in their houses and so on. But here's the thing, weak government is like non-alcoholic beer. It's useless. That said, the articles government did accomplish a couple things. First, it won the war, so yay! Unless you were a slave or a Native American, in which case, you know, probable boo.
That's
Second,
mainly
the government
because
developed
France
rules for
and
dealing with
Spain
one of the
helped
most
us, though.
persistent problems facing the new nation, Ohio, which was called the Northwest, presumably because it is north and west of Virginia. Getting control of the land meant taking it from the Indians who were living there, and the Articles government was empowered to make treaties, which it did. Crash Course world history fans will remember the Athenians telling the Melians that the strong do as they can and the weak suffer what they must, and the Americans definitely went to the Athenian school of treaty making. Through treaties signed at Fort Stanwix.
I mean, that's my mindset on service. I'm not saying like I approve of it or anything like that. It's just I'm a realist and I know how the world works. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what a treaty says. It doesn't matter what agreement you have with someone. None of that. If someone that is strong wants something from you, you kind of like you don't really have a say in it. Whoever is like the expressing force of power in a situation, if they decide to just like do whatever they want, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. So you always want to put yourself in a position where you can get stronger and you do like work on whether it's yourself or whether it's your country or whatever, like whatever it is. You have to have might because at the end of the day, might is the only thing that matters. When all other avenues fall apart, might is the only one that determines anything. And like if someone says they're going to give you something and you're like, all right, cool, thank you, but then like they say they change their mind, they're not going to give it to you, if they're stronger than you, guess what you can do about it? Nothing, and like it. Like that's it.
In Fort McIntosh, the Indians surrendered land north of the Ohio River. The biggest accomplishment of the Articles government was the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which set up a process to create 5 new states between the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. 2 things to know about this. First, it acknowledged that American Indians had a claim to the land and that they had to be treated better if settlers wanted to avoid violence. And second, Stan, can I get the foreshadowing filter? Yes, perfect. The ordinance outlawed slavery in all 5 of the new states. Still, the Articles government was a complete disaster for exactly one reason: it could not collect taxes. Both the national government and the individual states had racked up massive debt to pay for the war, and their main source of revenue became tariffs, but because Congress couldn't impose them, states had to do it individually. And this made international trade a total nightmare, a fact worsened by the British being kind of cranky about us winning the war and therefore unwilling to trade with them.
See, when it comes to taxes, I do not have a problem with taxes. I really don't. I really don't have a problem with taxes. Like, I don't mind the government using tax money as long as if it's going to places that it claims to go to. Like, I don't want my taxes going to some type of shadow entity that is just collecting them and getting rich. Like, if my taxes are going towards roads and building schools and funding scientific advancements and helping battle against disease and sickness and is creating welfare programs for people that are less fortunate, I have no problem paying taxes. I will pay extra taxes if it means doing that stuff. I know there's some people that are like, oh, well, if it doesn't impact me, I don't want to have to pay for it. But that's like, in a society, you want everyone to be able to live comfortably so that they can take the time needed to like study different things and become skilled and stuff like that. And that's what makes the country better. when everyone has a skill or are useful in some way. When everybody's struggling and they can't do this, they can't do that because they're too busy working paycheck to paycheck to try to just survive, it doesn't leave for much like room to better yourself.
A fact worsened by the British being kind of cranky about us.
Well, yes, states do have a say in taxes. There's two types of taxes. There's federal taxes and state taxes. So you pay taxes to your state and you pay taxes to the federal government.
Closing upon their debt-encumbered farms. This was called Shays' Rebellion after Revolutionary War veteran and indebted farmer Daniel Shays. The uprising was quelled by the state militia, but for many, this was the sign that the Articles government, which couldn't deal with the crisis at all, had to go. But not for everyone. Thomas Jefferson, for instance, was a fan of Shays' Rebellion. A little rebellion now and then is a good thing. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Which is all fine and good, I mean, unless you're the bleeding patriots or tyrants. But to most elites, Shays' Rebellion showed that too much democratic liberty among the lower classes could threaten private property. Also, people who held government bonds were nervous because without tax revenue, they were unlikely to get paid back. And when rich people feel like something has to be done, something is usually done. Let's go to the thought bubble. The first attempt to do something was a meeting in Annapolis in 1786 aimed at better regulating international trade. Only 6 states sent delegates, but they agreed to meet the next year in Philadelphia to revise the Articles of Confederation.
Also, I'm gonna stop it right here just for a second, just to say this, because I know there might be some people that might not understand me or like why and how I react to stuff. Just because I'm watching this video does not mean that I'm going to wholeheartedly just believe everything I hear and use this to teach other. Like, I understand that this is a YouTube video by somebody that either could possibly have like certain agendas or biases of their own, or might not have all their information there. I understand that. What I normally suggest when it comes to watching history-related videos is you want to go into it with an open mind and allow the subject matter to lead you into like a rabbit hole of study. Like, you want to go and look for this information and verify it yourself and things like that. Like, you never want to watch a video on YouTube and just immediately go, oh, that's true because I'm watching it on YouTube. Because people will say stuff on YouTube and not have any idea what the hell they're talking about. So that's absolutely a thing. So just know, even though I'm watching this and I'm like talking about it and stuff like that, just know that I understand that there could be some wrong information in it somewhere.
Delegates, but they agreed to meet the next year in Philadelphia to revise the Articles of Confederation. The delegates who met in Philly the next year had a funny definition of revision, though. Rather than make tweaks to the Articles, they wrote a new charter of government.
Well, I agree with you on that, Alicia.
Which is with some significant alterations.
But in that case, it's about getting politicians in place that'll implement that stuff.
Despite what some seem to believe, the 55 men
who
met in Philadelphia and hammered out a new form of government were not gods, but they were far from ordinary, especially for the time. Most were wealthy, some very much so. More than half had college educations, which was super rare since 0.001% of Americans attended college at the time. About 40% had served in the army during the war. But one thing they all shared was a desire for a stronger national government. The delegates agreed on many things. The government should have executive, legislative, and judicial branches and should be Republican with representatives rather than direct democracy. But the devil appeared in the details. Alexander Hamilton, probably the biggest proponent of very strong government, wanted the president and Senate to serve life terms, for example. That idea went nowhere because the overarching concern of almost all the delegates was to create a government that would protect against both tyranny by the government itself and tyranny by the people. They didn't want too much government, but they also didn't want too much democracy, which is why our presidents are still technically elected not directly by regular people, but by 538 members of the Electoral College. This system is so Byzantine and strange that when American politicians speak of spreading democracy through the world, they never actually advocate for American-style elections. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Yes, I know, you have fantastic elections in Canada. Yeah, right, okay, all that too. I get it. Okay, it's U.S. history, Thought Bubble. So conflicts between competing interests arose quickly at the Constitutional Convention.
The American election system is
the first being between states with big populations and those with small populations. Large states supported James Madison's Virginia plan, which called for a 2-house legislature with representation in both proportional to a state's population. And smaller states, fearing that the big boys would dominate, rallied behind the New Jersey plan. New Jersey. This called for a single legislative house with equal representation for each state, as with the the Articles of Confederation. But of course, coming from New Jersey, it had no chance of succeeding, and sure enough, it didn't. Instead, we got the Great Compromise, brokered by Connecticut's Roger Sherman, which gave us two houses: a House of Representatives with representation proportional to each state's population, and a Senate with 2 members from each state.
Well, it's not really even the fact that Americans wouldn't really want to pay extra taxes. It's just that Americans have been brainwashed into thinking that government programs and social programs are like a form of communism. And it's like they've been swept into this boogeyman of, oh, well, if you're paying for somebody else and they're not doing anything to benefit to deserve it, so you're just giving them handouts, and handouts are for the weak and this, that, and the other. But then the current system in place give out handouts all the time to the rich. We talk about tax cuts and subsidies and things like that. They get handouts all the damn time. But then they'll turn around and tell you that you getting welfare is bad and is communism and this, that, and the other. But then they advocate for it when it comes for themselves. So, like I said, it's just a matter of Americans being brainwashed by people that absolutely do not have their best interests at heart.
Great Compromise, brokered by Connecticut's Roger Sherman, which gave us 2 houses: a House of Representatives with representation proportional to each state's population, and a Senate with 2 members from each state. House members, also called congressmen, served 2-year terms, while senators served 6-year terms, with 1/3 of them being up for election in every 2 years.
I thought senators were also
the House
congressmen.
was designed to be responsive to the people, while the Senate was created to
Congress
never
people.
pass anything, and it was so masterfully designed that it still works to this day. However, this solution created another problem: who should be counted in terms of representation? Slaveholding states wanted slaves to count
This is
toward
when
their
the
population,
3/5
even though, of course, they could
compromise
not vote
comes
because they were
through.
property. States with few slaves argued that slaves shouldn't be counted as people because, just to be clear, none of these dudes were not racist. This issue was solved with the notorious 3/5 compromise.
That's another thing. During the Civil War era and stuff, and they were fighting, and I know early on they weren't fighting to free slaves, but halfway through the war it changed to that. Do not get it confused. Just because the North was fighting to free slaves does not mean that America wasn't a deeply white supremacist country. A lot of people that did advocate for freeing slaves did not want slaves in their economy. They didn't want to be competing with slaves when it comes to jobs and stuff. Like, they were still against the idea of living together with black folks. Like, they didn't want them to be slaves, but at the same time, they also didn't want them to have too many rights. That being said, the Confederates were still racist pieces of shit, and anybody using that argument of, oh, well, the North wasn't fighting to free slaves, it's still a stupid ass argument. Like, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the North won, which freed slaves. The South, if they would have won, regardless of what their purposes were, I know you might have had a grandparent or something that fought for their state or whatever the hell else, but it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, if they would have won, guess what? Slaves would have still been in chains, so that's all that matters.
None of these dudes were not racist. This issue was solved with the notorious 3/5 compromise, for the purpose of determining the population, the total number of white people plus 3/5 the population of other persons, the word slave was never used, would be the basis for the calculation. So, yeah, that's still in the Constitution. The Constitution also contains a fugitive slave clause requiring any escaped slave to be returned to their master. And this meant that a slave couldn't escape slavery by moving to a state where slavery was outlawed, which meant that on some level, some states couldn't enforce their own laws. Spoiler alert, this becomes problematic. But except for the tyranny of slavery, the framers really hated tyranny. To avoid tyranny of the government, the Constitution embraced 2 principles: separation of powers and federalism. The government was divided into 3 branches: legislative, executive, and judiciary. And the Constitution incorporated checks and balances. Each branch can check the power of the others. The legislature can make laws, but the president can veto those laws. The judiciary can declare laws void too, but that's a power they had to grant themselves. You won't find it in the Constitution. I promise, you can look for it. And federalism is the idea that governmental authority rests both in the national and the state governments. As an American, I am a citizen both of the United States and of the state of Indiana. And the national government, the one set up by the Constitution, is supposed to be limited in scope to certain enumerated powers. Most other powers, especially the protection of health, safety, and morals, are left to the states. But the Constitution also seeks to protect against the radicalism that too much democracy can bring. The mostly rich framers worried that the people, many of whom were poor and indebted, they might vote in Congress people or, God forbid, a president in favor of, like, redistribution of property. To hedge against this, senators were elected by the states, usually by state legislatures, and they were supposed to be, like, leading citizen types. You know, the kind of good Americans who take bribes and have adulterous affairs in airport bathrooms and patronize prostitutes and shoot Alexander Hamilton. Anyway, the other hedge against too much democracy is the aforementioned Electoral College, which many Americans hate because it has the potential to elect a president who did not win the popular vote. But that's kind of the point. The electors were supposed to be prominent, educated men of property who were better able to elect a president than, like, the rabble. But the Constitution of the United States is a really impressive document, especially when you consider its longevity. I mean, as Crash Course World History fans will remember, the nation-state is pretty new on the historical scene, and the United States established by the Constitution is actually one of the oldest ones. But the Constitution would be meaningless if it hadn't been ratified, which it was, but not without a fight that helped clarify America's political ideology. 9 out of the 13 states were required to ratify the Constitution, and special conventions called for the purpose. In order to convince the delegates to vote for it, 3 of the framers, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, wrote a series of 85 essays.
Whoever painted that picture of Alexander Hamilton, they fucked up bad. The proportions are just all... Every time I see that picture of him, it's like the proportions are just all off. Now, I don't know what the dude looked like in real life. I would hope he didn't look like this. But, like, the eyes are so big and pushed together. The nose... the width of his nose doesn't make any sense given how, like, protruding it is. Like, Rose, you can back me up on this. As someone that, like, draws and stuff, it's very, like, OCD inducing. Like, oh god, separate his eyes a bit. Make that fucking right eye a little, like, smaller because it's, like, further in the distance. Or something. Like, it's just so off. It's like they just copy and pasted the same eye and just, like, put it on the other side.
The Federalist Papers. Taken together, they're a powerful and ultimately persuasive argument for why a strong national government is necessary and ultimately not a threat to people's liberty. Oh, it's time for the mystery document?
Mystery
the rules here
document.
Are simple. If I name the author of the mystery document, shock as in surprise. If I don't, shock as in... All right, Stan, let's see what we got here. If circumstances should at any time oblige the government to form an army of any magnitude, that army can never be formidable to the liberties of the people while there is a large body of citizens, little, if at all, inferior to them in discipline and the use of arms, who stand ready to defend their own rights and those of their fellow citizens. This appears to me the only substitute that
Is that Contra or is that Arnold?
Standing army and the best possible security against it, if it should exist. Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton. Yes! Too easy, Stan, although I appreciate the opportunity for a rant. The whole idea of the Second Amendment was that the people...
See, that picture of him also, his eyes look kind of... was his eyes just like that? That one looks kind of weird, too. That back eye looks kind of bulgy. And it looks like his eyes are too far into his, like, head. And his nose is, like, sunken in too far into his head. Given, like, the shape of it, looks like it should be, like, protruding more. It's so weird. Now, obviously this is before photos and stuff, but I would love to have, like, hoped that, like, he was alive long enough to be around during, like, the early photos, just to get a picture of him, because all the pictures have him portrayed like this.
Stan, although I appreciate the opportunity for a rant. The whole idea of the Second Amendment was that the people could protect themselves from a standing army by being equally well armed, which these days would mean not that citizens should have the right to buy assault rifles, but that they should have the right to buy, like, unmanned drones and arguably suitcase nukes. And by the way, in the Constitution, this is not listed as a privilege, it is listed as a right. And as a right, if I can't afford my own Predator drone, I guess the government should buy one for me. It's almost as if Alexander Hamilton had no way of knowing that weaponry would one day advance past the musket. P.S. You know how Alexander Hamilton died? Gunshot! Sorry, I had to. I am on a roll. So it would be easy to ignore the people who oppose the Constitution because, you know, they lost. But
the thing that gets me about the right to bear arms argument is never once does it say, like, you have a right to bear certain types of arms. It just says right to bear arms. Anything can make you armed. Like, if I grab a damn lead pipe, technically I'm armed right now. Like, if I grab a knife, I'm armed. Like, all that is armed. It's not like... Let me see. Yeah, armed just means equipped with or carrying a weapon. That's it. It literally just means being equipped with or carrying a weapon. It doesn't classify what type of weapon. It doesn't mean firearm. It just means arms. So technically that definition can, like, if we were to do gun reform and get rid of certain types of guns, it still wouldn't be violating the First Amendment. Because the Second Amendment. Because the Second Amendment doesn't say that you have a right to bear all arms. And there are certain arms that even today we all agree people shouldn't have. Like, I think we all can safely say that we don't want people to be able to get nuclear weapons or be able to privately own like unmanned drones that can like bomb people from thousands of miles away, or tanks or anything. Like, there's already things that like stop you from getting certain weapons. Even if it isn't, like, we would all agree if we did implement it, it's like, yeah, that's a bit far. Only question is like where that limit is.
Role. So it would be easy to ignore the people who opposed the Constitution because, you know, they lost. But some of the ideas of these so-called anti-federalists were particularly powerful, and they deserve a bit of attention. Anti-federalists, unlike the mostly wealthy federalists, were usually supported by common people, small farmers who weren't as involved in commercial activity. They saw less need for a strong national government that would foster trade and protect creditors, and the anti-federalists were very afraid of a strong government, especially one dominated by the wealthy. Writers like James Winthrop held that a large group of United States would be like an empire, and that no extensive empire can be governed upon republican principles. As evidence, he could point to Britain, or all the way back to Rome. Smaller, more local governments are more responsive to the people and better able to protect their rights. To the anti-federalists, that meant state governments. And while ultimately the Federalists won out and the Constitution was ratified, the issue of how large government should be did not go away. So the Constitution was really only a starting point. It's a vague document, and the details would be worked out in the political process, and then on the battlefield. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. Crash Course is produced and directed by Stan Muller. Our script supervisor is Meredith Danko. The show is written by my high school history teacher, Raul Meyer, and myself, edited by Stan and Mark Olson. The associate producer is Danica Johnson, and our graphics team is Thought Bubble. If you have questions about today's video or anything about American history, good news, there are historians and comments.
Let's see if he has a
Ask
Patreon.
away. Thanks for watching Crash Course, and as we say in my hometown, don't forget to be awesome.
Oh, he doesn't have a Patreon. Wow. Maybe he does. Let me check the description. Does he have a Patreon? Yes, he does. Patreon.com/CrashCourse. So I'll go ahead and leave that sitting there while I talk a bit more. Again, I understand that like subject matters like this are more nuanced. It's not as open and shut, and it's all about opinion. I'm not against the idea of like more conservative ways of thinking. I understand. Like, at the end of the day, we're all on the same coin. Like, you usually want what's best for your country. You just have different opinions of like how to get there. In a lot of cases, it's like we both agree with the same thing. It's just a matter of like where you put the stopper. Some people want to put it a little bit further. Some people want to put it a little bit closer. But at the end of the day, that's kind of it. I think the polarized state of America today is fucking ridiculous, because it comes like the fact that you have people out here that are treating like everyone on the other side like they're some type of virus or some shit. Like, oh, you're a Democrat. Oh, you're a Republican. Well, you're a conservative. Well, you're a liberal. Like, how about you look at someone based on their own political beliefs? Because, shocker, not everybody has the exact same political beliefs. It's not like when it comes to beliefs, everybody's just this copy and pasted template just done over and over and over again. Like, for example, if somebody watched my video just now, and I mean, obviously you can take away the fact that I'm on the left side of the political spectrum. If you watch this and because I said I'm on the left, or because of some of the things that I've mentioned, you automatically go, oh, well, that means you're a Biden supporting, commie loving, like AOC Democratic piece of crap or some stuff like. If you take that away from it, then that lets me know that you have no ability to separate a person's individual beliefs from the talking points you heard on TV or internet or wherever else. Like, learn to actually differentiate people. Life isn't that damn simple. Like, you come off like a dumbass. That's what it comes off to me. Like, you come off as a dumbass. Yeah, the extremes get too much airtime. That's really it, because it's like the vocal minority tends to be the ones that get the most attention. And because a lot of news organizations, especially cable news, tend to like incentivize ratings and stuff, they tend to look and seek out the more extreme opinions and stuff, which makes people think that that opinion is more popular than it actually is. But the truth is, it's not. It's just that's what the cameras are. It's like, if you work at a business like a restaurant or something, chances are, if you give someone some food and they like it, they're probably not going to say too much about it, because it's like they enjoyed it, they have. But someone that might have got some food and might not have liked it, they're going to be vocal and stuff. And at the end of the day, despite the fact that you served 100+ people, that one person is going to be the one on your mind when you leave, because of their the extreme action that they had left an impression on you. So it's like, you might think, oh man, today was a horrible day. People complain too much at this job, this, that, and the other. But then when you think about it, that was one person out of hundreds of people that you served that day. It's just the people you serve that are satisfied with your service, they're probably not going to say anything, because they got what they expected. They wanted to go to your place and eat your food and enjoy themselves, and they did. They don't really have too much to say about that. They got what they expected. They're going to go about their day. But anybody that's had their expectations either not met or far exceeded, they're going to be the ones that's likely to say something. But their opinion doesn't represent everyone, though. That's the thing. You said people have either this or that mentality. Yeah, it's tribalism. That's what it is. Like, people have this mindset of like, okay, well, I'm going to stick in this group with a bunch of people that thinks like me, and as soon as you or anyone else disagrees, now you're no longer part of that group. That makes you part of the other group, so that makes you the enemy. Like, nobody is looking at people on an individual basis and going, yeah, you have a different opinion on this subject, but we agree on these other subjects. You only hear the difference that you have on that one subject, and you think that represents everything. Oh, you don't agree with me on this, therefore you don't agree with me with anything else, so therefore I'm going to ignore you, or I'm going to, toss you to the side and not pay attention. Like, it's fucking stupid. But it all comes down to laziness. People don't want to take the time to get to know people on an individual level. So it's like, they just automatically throw people into assumptions and preconceived notions. It's fucking stupid. It's also the fault of normie people afraid to debate. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's normie people afraid to debate. I'd say it's more people that try very hard to be in the middle. So they try to give every side fair room to talk, but some sides don't deserve to talk, because they're just flat out wrong. Like, when it comes to an extreme ideology that's clearly wrong, I don't need you taking a middle ground on this subject. Like, that's wrong. They don't deserve a platform. Don't be putting them on your shows and promoting them like they're they deserve to have their fair shot. I don't agree with that. Certain subjects, when it comes to hate speech or extreme sexism or anything like that, and I know those are subjective. It really that can change depending on who you're talking to. But I think we all have a certain line that's okay, this is obvious. You don't go here. Too controversial. I mean, yeah, there are some people that are just too middle ground. But then it's like, it depends. It really does depend. Oh, I'm sorry, Alicia. I just noticed the question. Um, you asked me if I'm anti-gun. I'm not anti-gun. I'm not so like I've said it before. I think that when it comes to guns, there's only three types of guns people need in their lives. That's a handgun for self-defense. That's like a shotgun for home defense, and a rifle for hunting and stuff. That's all you need. Like you don't need any guns outside of that. And I know people be like, oh, well, you need AR-15 rifles because you go hog hunting, this, that, and the other, and you got to take out hogs. Like, why can't you do that with a shotgun? I get like certain handguns, maybe hogs can like tank those hits and still come after you. Why not use a shotgun? Are you afraid you're gonna miss with a shotgun? Like what? A rifle and a shotgun should be all you need in that situation. Well, the thing about letting idiots speak is it only works if there's no idiots around to hear them. The problem with letting idiots speak is that a lot of times there's idiots in the crowd that pick that up, and now you have multiple idiots saying the same thing. That only works when an idiot is talking in front of a well-informed audience. Then everybody can look at him like, yeah, they're an idiot. But we've seen multiple times throughout history that like there's a crowd for everyone. No matter how stupid the talking point is, there are flat earthers today. There are flat earthers, there are anti-vaxxers, there are like people that don't believe we landed on the moon. And these are like popular conspiracy theories. Like it only works if there are no idiots around to pick up the idiotic talking points. So it is what it is.